What's going on? Today we're going to check out these 5 awesome cameras in front of me that you can pick up for less than $300 used. Now each of these cameras is from a different brand with a different lens mount, so pretty much no matter what equipment you already have or which camera system you want to start with, there should be a good option for you here no matter what. Now also, I'm going to link all these cameras as well as any accessories and lenses and stuff like that I used with them down in the description. And like I said, all these cameras are under $300, but only when you purchase them used. And pretty much at this price point, if you're looking for an interchangeable lens camera, buying a camera used is literally your only option. There aren't any brand new interchangeable lens cameras you can buy for under $300. Actually, the absolute cheapest interchangeable lens mirrorless camera you can buy new is the Canon R100, which is around $400. And I actually do have a few videos about that on my channel, which I'll link down in the description. All right, I don't want to waste your time anymore. Let's check out the first camera. All right, first up we have the Sony NEX-7. So this is a mirrorless camera that Sony released back in 2011, so a pretty old camera, but to be honest, most of these cameras we're going to be talking about are fairly old, since there is no brand new interchangeable lens camera that you can get for under $300. So since the only option is to buy used, that's why we're taking a look at older cameras like this, but don't let that fool you from the fact that these still take amazing looking photos, and most of them take pretty great looking video as well. And so you can usually find this online for about $300 used. Now, I will link a couple websites down in the description that I recommend getting used camera gear from. I usually buy from MPB, KEH, or eBay.com. And so of course I'll have links to all these cameras down in the description, as well as all the accessories and lenses and different things that I use with them in this video. Alright, so for a sensor on the NEX-7, you're getting a 24 megapixel APS-C size sensor. And so that's going to give you really sharp, great looking photos. You know, 24 megapixels is still pretty much the standard for APS-C cameras like this. So this was honestly pretty far ahead of its time, being a 24 megapixel mirrorless camera coming out in 2011. And so with the APS-C sensor, you're going to have a 1.5x crop on your lenses. So if you have a 10mm lens on this camera, it's essentially going to be equivalent to a 15mm lens on a full frame camera. And then for the lens mount, you're getting Sony's E-mount, which is a super versatile lens mount. There's almost an unlimited amount of lenses available for this from Sony, as well as a bunch of third-party brands that'll offer great lenses at really budget price points. Alright, for video quality on the NEX-7, it's not the best video quality. It can record 1080p up to 60 frames per second, and it can also do 1080p at 24 and 30 frames per second. But that's about it for video quality. This can't do 4K video, although there is one camera on this list that can do 4K video at less than $300, which is pretty wild. But yeah, as for the video quality itself, it's really nothing special. There is an HDMI output if you want to connect a monitor to it. And there's also a microphone input. But to be honest, the video is pretty soft. And I mean, at this point in 2025, most iPhones or just generally any smartphone is going to have better quality video than this. You know, obviously that won't compete with the depth of field you'll get from like an f1.2 lens or something like that. But in general, I'll let you be the judge for yourself, but I just don't think this is really worth the hassle much for just doing video. Now also on the back, you're getting a 3-inch tilting LCD screen. This isn't a touchscreen and it's not fully articulating, so you can't really vlog very well with it or anything like that. But it does flip up and it flips down, which is a lot handier than having a fully fixed screen at least. And then of course you're getting an electronic viewfinder in this camera right up here as well. Alright, for the photo burst rate in this, it can shoot up to 10 photos per second, which again, at this age of a camera and at this price point, that is a surprisingly great burst rate. Although the autofocus in this camera really isn't super fast, so that'll be one of the big limitations, especially for moving objects in sports and things like that. As for ISO range, this can go from 100 all the way up to 16,000. And I'll go ahead and show you some examples of the full ISO range, just so you can see what the noise and grain looks like throughout the range. Alright, next up, this camera doesn't have any sort of in-body image stabilization or IBIS, so you're probably going to want to find a lens with image stabilization if you can. Otherwise, just keep in mind that there's no stabilization in this camera. And also, this isn't weather sealed in any way, so definitely keep this out of any sort of moisture, dust, and things like that. Alright, lastly for the specs of this has one SD card slot at the bottom and the battery slot. and it's just a standard UHS 1 slot. And then for the weight of this camera, this is a tiny little mirrorless camera, and it only comes in at 400 grams. So this is an absolutely tiny camera without a lens, maybe even pocketable. And that's really just one of the strong points of this for traveling, for just portability in general. This is fantastic. All right, now let's get into some of the standout features as well as some of the limitations. So really one of the biggest standout features of this camera is going to be its high resolution 24 megapixel APS-C sensor. A 24 megapixel sensor, especially back in 2011, was pretty far ahead of its time. And honestly, even new Sony APS-C cameras like the A6700, pretty much Sony's flagship APS-C camera, that has a 26 megapixel sensor, so 2 megapixels more than the NEX-7. And you can seriously get some awesome looking photos out of this sensor still, especially if you have the right lens. Also, of course, you can see this is an extremely small, light, and portable camera. You can really take it anywhere with you in just a small camera bag. Now, another standout feature for video at least, especially something that's not very common at this price point, is going to be this microphone input jack. So you can connect a lavalier microphone, shotgun microphone, or of course pretty much any other microphone that has a 3.5mm jack. So that'll definitely be useful if you do something like vlogging or recording videos like I'm doing right here. Or of course anything that you want to have decent quality audio, you're going to want to hook up an external microphone because the built-in mics on this are not very good. Alright, so this is the internal microphone right now on the NEX-7. I'm filming on the Yongnuo 11mm f1.8 lens, so this is what it sounds like vlog test. It's slightly breezy right now, so there might be a little bit of wind noise, but obviously the internal microphone is not going to be as good as if you plug one into this, whether it's a lavalier mic, shotgun mic, or something like that. Alright, lastly for standout features, this is something that a lot of cameras, again, at this age and this price point aren't going to have, and that's of course this pretty nice tilting screen right here. So again, a lot of older cameras, and especially budget cameras at this price point, are going to have fixed screens that don't adjust, they don't tilt or swivel in any way. So really any camera that has some sort of tilt or adjustment in its screen is going to be pretty nice. Alright, now it's time to get into some of the limitations. So first of all, this has an awesome high resolution sensor. However, this does have Sony's older color science that just really isn't as good as their newer cameras and really other brands of cameras of this age. You know, Sony's colors in their older cameras like this are a little bit more green tinted and just not the highest color quality in general. But the thing about that is if you shoot raw photos, you can really adjust the colors and anything about the image to look exactly how you want it to. But if you record video with this or shoot JPEG photos straight out of the camera, you're definitely gonna notice that the colors just really don't look as good as a lot of other cameras do straight out of the camera. Back then, Sony just really had a lot of work to do on their colors that they've fixed nowadays, but again, that's just a slight limitation with this old of a Sony camera. Also, the autofocus is a little bit finicky. It's not the fastest, and there have been times where it's been slightly unreliable. It's actually surprisingly smooth and decent when it comes to video recording, but for me it was really with photos where it would be kind of finicky. It would jump back and forth a lot before it would find focus. And I wouldn't say it's at all unusable, but it was just a little bit of a limiting factor for me and a little bit hard to fully trust the autofocus on this camera. Also, Sony's older menu system and a lot of their older cameras, you know, up until, you know, the A6000 series or even a little bit past that, Sony's menu system was just not very good. Everything is just so split apart and hard to find exactly the type of setting you need. And yeah, in general, just a very clunky old menu system. You're also getting a proprietary, really weird hot shoe with this camera. So this is absolutely not a normal hot shoe. You can't put normal flashes or microphones or anything on this. It's really, really weird, but Sony kind of tried to use this proprietary system for whatever reason. I'm sure money's the reason, but whatever reason, they decided to use this proprietary hot shoe system. There's literally not a normal hot shoe on this camera normally. You have to buy an adapter that pretty much slides into this. Then you can put a normal hot shoe on this to slide in a microphone or a flash or anything like that. It's definitely a pretty big quirk about this camera to keep in mind. And lastly, for the quirks of the NEX-7, the battery life is pretty bad. It uses Sony's FW50 batteries. They're these tiny little batteries. Sony has finally upgraded most of their cameras to their FZ100 batteries, which are a lot better. Like, those are some of my favorite camera batteries. These are some of my least favorite camera batteries of any brand I've used. So battery life on the NEX-7 is pretty bad. I would recommend a bunch of extra batteries if you buy this. Luckily, third-party batteries are pretty inexpensive and they work great for me. So I will link a bunch of spare batteries down in the description, as well as this hot shoe adapter if you need that as well. Alright, next up we have the Nikon D7100. So this is a DSLR camera that Nikon released back in 2013, and you can see this has a pretty bulky big body. This thing is rugged, it's durable, it's weather sealed, but we'll get into that in a minute. So this camera you can pick up used for right around $275, which is awesome for how great of a camera this is for photography. This thing is an absolute photography workhorse. So for the sensor on this, you're getting a 24 megapixel APS-C size sensor with a 1.5x crop. For the lens mount, you're getting Nikon's F mount, which has been around for a long time. There are a ton of lenses available for this from Nikon as well as third-party brands, but it's not a mirrorless lens mount, so there's not quite as much adaptability and just not quite as big of a selection of lenses available. But the Nikon F mount still has plenty of lenses and pretty much any focal length and budget and just type of lens that you might want to look for. And if you flip it around back, you're getting a 3.2-inch fixed screen on the back here. It's not a touch screen and it's fixed right in the back, so it's not adjustable, it's not fully articulating. So seeing your screen at really weird, awkward angles is going to be a little bit tricky. And then right up top you have an optical viewfinder, so this isn't a mirrorless camera, it's not an electronic viewfinder, just a fully optical one. Now this camera has a burst rate of up to 6 photos per second, so it's pretty decent, but obviously nothing extraordinary. And then you're getting an ISO range between 100 and 6400, but it's expandable up to 25,600 in the high mode. And so I'll go ahead and show you what the photos look like throughout the whole ISO range, just so you can see what the noise and grain looks like. Alright, then the D7100 also doesn't have any form of stabilization built into it, so you're probably going to want either a lens that has stabilization or just really keep in mind that there's no stabilization in this camera. However, it is weather sealed, so this has pretty decent weather sealing. Of course, it has really great covers over all the ports and everything like that. Now you do need to pair that with a weather sealed lens, but if you have that, you can take this out in some pretty rugged environments and it's gonna perform great for you. Also, speaking of the professionally built body, you have 2 SD card slots in this camera, so you can of course just have one as a backup for if your first one runs out, or you can record simultaneously to both of these SD cards just in case one of them malfunctions or something. You know, especially for professionals, having 2 SD card slots is really, really nice. And then lastly, for the weight of this, like I said, it's a pretty bulky camera. This comes in at 765 grams for just the body of this camera. So a lot bulkier, but also a lot better built than something like a mirrorless, you know, Sony NEX-7. So definitely a personal preference choice if you prefer portability or if you prefer a big, bulky, rugged camera. Alright, now let's get into some of the standout features as well as some of the limitations of the D7100. Alright, one of the biggest standout features of this is its awesome high-resolution 24 megapixel sensor. 24 megapixels is pretty substantial on a camera of this age and at this price point, and you get some awesome looking photos out of this. These are very, very sharp photos and you can crop in pretty substantially and still have awesome image quality. And actually, even to push that a step further, this camera doesn't have an OLPF, or an optical low pass filter. It allows this camera to take even sharper and more detailed images than cameras that do have that filter. It's another reason why, for photography at least, this is an absolute beast of a camera. Now, of course, you're also getting this really heavy-duty, weather-sealed, rugged body. It has so many buttons and dials, customizability. Like I said, it's weather-sealed, which is pretty substantial as well, especially at this price point. You're getting those dual card slots, which is amazing as well. Like, you're getting all the bells and whistles of a professional camera body, which really makes this thing just an absolute workhorse for photography. But I do still have a few limitations to mention with this, even if they are slightly personal preference oriented. The first one being kind of one of the standout features as well. This is a big, heavy, rugged body. You know, if that's not what you're looking for and you'd rather have a small little portable camera like the Sony NEX-7, I could definitely see the substantial size and weight of this being a downside for some people. Also, one of the big limitations of this is going to be its fixed screen on the back here. It's not touchscreen, it's not articulating or tilting in any way. So all you're getting is this fixed screen on the back of the camera here, along with your optical viewfinder. And then lastly, the video quality out of the D7100 is definitely just okay, but it's usable video quality if you want to get some video clips with it. But I would definitely not purchase this camera specifically for recording video. Even though it does have a microphone input and headphone output, You can get decent video quality out of this, but I would think of this more as just a strictly photography camera. Alright, next up we have the Pentax K5. So this is a DSLR camera that was released from Pentax in 2010. So I'm pretty sure this is the oldest camera on this list. But again, don't let that deter you from the fact that all these cameras still take amazing looking photos. The age really is not that important. And so this camera you can pick up used for right around $200 for the body. So definitely one of the more affordable options on this list. And so with this camera, you're getting a 16 megapixel APS-C size sensor with a 1.5 times crop. And so 16 megapixels will give you plenty of resolution, plenty of quality for really anything you might need. And so for the lens mount on this, it's the Pentax KAF2 lens mount. And now there's definitely a pretty small selection of lenses available for this, especially compared to Nikon, Canon, and Sony lenses. But there's still some really great and definitely affordable lenses available for this. And as for video on the Pentax K5, I really wouldn't recommend buying this for video or really doing much video with this. It's okay and it'll kind of get the job done, you know, there's no microphone input or anything like that for getting good audio, but the video really just isn't anything to write home about. I wouldn't buy this camera to record video. I'll just put it like that, to be honest. You know, I would really think of this as a strictly photography-based camera. On the back, you're getting a 3-inch fixed LCD screen, so it's not a touchscreen, it's not articulating, just fixed right in the back, with, of course, an optical viewfinder up top. And then for the photo burst rate, you can do up to 7 photos per second, so it's pretty decent, but really the autofocus speed is going to be your limiting factor with this. For the ISO range of this camera, it goes from 80 all the way up to 12,800 ISO. And I'll of course show you photo examples throughout the ISO range so you can see what the noise and grain looks like. And you can kind of make a judgment for yourself at what point you would stop pushing the ISO on this camera. Next up, this is a really great standout feature, which I'll get into a little more in a second, but this camera has in-body image stabilization built in. In-body image stabilization is very uncommon for any camera at this price point, and even more uncommon for DSLRs. And then this camera also is weather sealed, and you're really getting a great feeling and great looking body as well. It's definitely bulky and big, and it feels like it would last forever. I mean, this is a well-built body, kind of similar to the Nikon D7100. This just doesn't really have quite as many bells and whistles as that, I would say. And then for SD card slots, you're getting just one on the side right here, so it's nice having it separate from the battery slot so you can just easily swap the SD cards in and out. And then for the weight of this camera, it comes in at 740 grams, so not at all a light camera. This is pretty bulky, it's definitely gonna have some weight. For me personally, it's not too bad, and I don't really mind carrying something like this around with me, but maybe something I would just keep in mind if you are more concerned about portability and size and weight. Alright, now let's get into some of the standout features and limitations. So first of all, one of the big standout features of this that you really don't get in most other cameras at this price point, and especially DSLR cameras, this camera has in-body image stabilization, or sensor shift image stabilization. So no matter what lens you use on this camera, you're gonna get stabilization out of it, which is awesome. This will help you substantially in getting more stable video, but also it'll allow you to take photos at much slower shutter speeds and still get a usable sharp image. In-body image stabilization is honestly almost unheard of at this price point. Now you're also getting a really great, heavy-duty, just awesome, professionally built body. You know, I wouldn't say this is as good of build quality and as many features and bells and whistles as the Nikon D7100, but this is still a hefty magnesium alloy, I believe, camera body. You're getting a microphone input on this camera, that screen on the top there, with a nice deep grip. It's easy to hold, it's really comfortable to hold. But of course, like any camera, there are some limitations to think about. Number one being, the Pentax lens selection is a little bit more limited than other brands. In general, there's just not as big of a selection of lenses and brands and, you know, price points of lenses as there are for other mounts like the E mount and Canon EF mount and things like that. Also similar to the Nikon D7100, this is a pretty heavy and bulky camera compared to mirrorless cameras. So if you want something that's extremely light and small and portable and potentially even pocketable, this is obviously not going to be the right option for you. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Another limitation is, of course, this fixed screen on the back. It's not a touchscreen, and there's no adjustability, no tilting, no fully articulating, nothing like that. Just a fixed screen right in the back of the camera. And lastly, for the limitations with the Pentax K5, I would say in general, this camera just does show its age a little bit. General operation of the camera is just a little more clunky and slow, you know, even compared to other cameras of a similar age or price point. But again, you're getting awesome looking colors, awesome photos out of this. And for photography, for getting great looking photos, maybe just at a little slower of a pace, the Pentax K5 is awesome. Alright, next up we have the Canon 6D. So this is a DSLR camera that Canon released back in 2013. And the 6D you can pick up used for right around $300. It's kind of tricky to find at that price point, and it might be more realistically just over $300. But with a little bit of searching and finding the right deal, you can definitely get this for less than $300, which is really insane because this is a full frame camera. So you're getting a 20 megapixel full frame sensor in this Canon 6D that is going to give you amazing, amazing looking photos. Having a full frame sensor camera at this price point is really, really difficult to find, and that's really one of the big selling points of the Canon 6D. So for the lens mount, you're getting Canon's EF mount, which is a really popular lens mount. There's almost an unlimited selection of lenses available for this lens mount. Really at any price point, whatever type of lens you want, whatever focal length, there's probably going to be an option out there for the Canon EF mount. For video, this can do 1080p up to 30 frames per second, which unfortunately isn't really anything special. It is going to be full frame video at 1080p, which in general might look a little bit better than video from cameras with the smaller sensors. And you are also getting a microphone input and an HDMI output on this. But realistically, it's not going to be anything to write home about in terms of video quality coming out of this. Again, the next and last camera is going to be really the video camera if you want to buy one of these strictly for recording video. Then on the back, you're getting a 3-inch fixed screen. It's not a touchscreen, it's not articulating, just a fixed screen right in the back, as well as, of course, an optical viewfinder right up top. For the photo burst rate on this, you're getting 4.5 photos per second. As for stabilization and weather sealing, this doesn't have any type of in-body image stabilization, so I would recommend leaning towards a lens that does have it if you want to get more stable photos and video. However, the body is weather sealed, so this is a big, bulky, nice DSLR body. It's just really a more professional body in general, which means you're going to get nice weather sealing in this, so you're not going to have to worry as much taking this in wet or dusty or any sort of tough environments. I'll of course show you photo examples throughout the ISO range so you can see what the noise and grain looks like, and you can kind of make a judgment for yourself at what point you would stop pushing the ISO on this camera. And then lastly, you're getting one SD card slot on the side here, which is nice to have it separate from the battery slot. And then for weight, this comes in at 770 grams. So a very bulky, big DSLR body. Again, you're gonna have to use your judgment if you'd rather have a big, bulky, durable body like this or something a lot more small and portable that's gonna be not quite as good of a build quality. Because obviously, you know, to have a more light build quality, you have to have more plasticky, lighter components. By far, the biggest standout feature of the Canon 6D is gonna be its full frame sensor. Being able to get a full frame sensor camera for less than $300 is really, really substantial. Now also, you're getting pretty good fast autofocus for photos. For videos, it's a little different, and it uses a different type of autofocus in live view that isn't quite as good or fast, but for photography, awesome autofocus. Also, you're getting good quality video out of this camera. Good full frame 1080p video with a microphone input with the right lens. It looks pretty awesome. But like always, there are some limitations. So first of all, very personal preference. This is a big, heavy-duty, awesome feeling body, which isn't gonna be very good if you want a tiny, pocketable, travel-sized camera body. It's heavy, it's built well, it's gonna last a long time, but it's not very light and portable like most mirrorless cameras would be. And also for limitation, you're getting this fixed screen on the back. It's not adjustable, it's not touchscreen, it doesn't move at all. It's just a big fixed screen right in the back. To be honest, that's about all I can think of for limitations with this. I mean, the 6D is just an awesome, like almost perfectly well-rounded camera for $300. All Alright, last but definitely not least is the Panasonic Lumix G7. So this is a mirrorless camera that Panasonic released back in 2015, so this is actually the newest camera on this list. And like I mentioned earlier, this is going to be the best option for you if you want the highest quality video that you can get for under $300. But first up, let's go over some of the specs. So this you can pick up for about $275 used. And so with this camera, you're getting a 16 megapixel micro four thirds size sensor. So this is also the smallest sensor on this list. So it's going to be twice the crop factor of a full frame sensor, which means if you put a 10mm lens on this, it's going to be equivalent to a 20mm lens on a full frame camera. And then of course, you're also getting a micro four thirds lens mount on this camera as well, which is a very, very versatile lens mount. I would say as versatile in terms of options of lenses as the Sony E mount, if not even more. So in terms of just pure lens affordability for the ecosystem for building out your lens collection, the micro four thirds is probably going to be one of your best bets. And then for video quality, like I mentioned, this is the only camera on this list that can do 4K video. So the G7 can do 4K up to 30 frames per second or 1080p up to 60 frames per second. There's also a bunch of adjustability for the video settings and things like that. You know, you can adjust the bit rates, and there's a high bitrate mode that records really, really sharp, good looking 4K video. If you know what you're doing, if you have the right settings, you know, the right lens, this is an awesome camera for video. And you're even getting a 3-inch fully articulating touchscreen on the back. So you can vlog with this if you flip it out like that. And then of course, this is also a great camera for photos as well. Really sharp, really great looking photos. And you can do burst rates up to 7 frames per second. Decent burst rate as well. Also decent autofocus in this camera. I mean, really everything about this camera, since it is the newest on this list, it's gonna just be a little bit better. You know, the menu system is a little bit just simpler and more modern. You can go through the menus and go through the settings with the touchscreen, which is really nice and really easy to do. And then for ISO range on this camera, anywhere from 100 to 25,600, and I'll of course show examples so you can see what the noise and grain looks like throughout that range. Now here's the thing though, this doesn't have any sort of IBIS or any sort of image stabilization built into it, so it's going to be really handy, especially for recording video if you have a lens with stabilization. Otherwise, you're just really going to want to put this on a tripod, a gimbal, or just hold it as steady as you can because there's no stabilization built into this. And also this camera doesn't have any sort of weather sealing, so keep that in mind as well. It is not the most rugged built body. It is a little bit more on the plastic side and a little bit lighter. Now you're also getting an HDMI on this right side here, so you can do HDMI output to a monitor. And then you're getting one single SD card slot in the battery slot. I wish it was on the right side here, but of course they did have a couple ports there, so they kind of had to put it at the bottom in the battery slot. And then for the weight, this comes in at 410 grams for the body only. So this is a really light camera. Like, it's not even as small as the Sony NEX-7. It's a decent amount bigger than that, but barely any heavier than that camera. So definitely not the best build quality, but in turn that makes this an extremely light and portable camera. Alright, so for standout features and limitations of the Panasonic G7, easily the biggest standout feature of this camera is going to be its video recording capabilities. You can record 4K video with high bitrate options. There's tons of adjustability, tons of video quality settings you can change. And in general, just getting high quality, great looking, sharp 4K video with that much flexibility and different options and adjustments you can do is pretty much unheard of for less than $300. So that's easily the biggest standout feature of this, and the biggest thing I would recommend this for is for recording video at an extreme budget. You're also getting a fully articulating touchscreen. So not only is it fully articulating, this is a touchscreen that you can change settings, you can go through the menu and do all that with, which is really, really nice. You know, even for vlogging, you can flip the screen all the way around and vlog with it. You're getting a microphone input as well. So again, you can hook up any type of 3.5mm microphone to this and get high quality audio. A bunch of adjustment dials, which are really good for obviously both photos and videos. The micro four thirds lens mount is extremely adaptable, pretty much an unlimited selection of lenses, similar to the Sony E mount. But of course, like any camera, there are some limitations that I want to bring up with this. The number one being, the autofocus in this camera really isn't that great. I wouldn't say it's fully unusable, and especially for photography, it worked fine for me and it got the job done, but when you record video, it's definitely not as good. It's a lot slower. I would definitely recommend just sticking in manual focus with this, and most of the time I honestly used vintage lenses like this Canon FD lens right here. Now also something that's just pretty much a limitation of the size of the sensor on this. Micro Four Thirds sensors, when compared to bigger sensors like APS-C or even full frame sensors, they have limitations that are kind of hard to get around that are basically just because of the size of the sensor. So things like getting a shallow depth of field are going to be a little bit trickier with a sensor like this, as well as things like low light noise performance is going to be a little bit worse, you know, versus a full frame sensor like the Canon 6D. And then lastly, for limitations, the body on this camera doesn't feel the best. You can tell that's definitely the thing that they had to cheap out on this in order to give you all the specs that they put into this camera. So honestly, the body on this generally just feels light. It feels a little plasticky. It doesn't feel like it would last as long or be quite as rugged as cameras like the Nikon D7100 or Canon 6D. But it is also a lot smaller of a body, and like I said, the lower build quality does lead it to be a lot lighter of a camera. But that's pretty much all I got for limitations with this. Alright, hopefully at this point you have enough information to decide which camera's best for you, if any of them. But real quick, I want to give my personal recommendation on which one of these cameras I'd recommend for photography, for video, and then for both. So first of all, if you just plan on purchasing a camera for photography and you don't plan on recording much video with it, you just want the best possible photo camera with the best specs, best image quality in general, I would recommend either the Canon 6D or the Nikon D7100. Of course with the 6D, you can't beat a full frame camera when it comes to that full frame look, when it comes to photography. You know, especially portraits and things like that. The full frame look is just awesome. You really just can't go wrong with the Canon 6D. This is a beast of a camera. And same with the D7100. I mean, it has that, you know, really nice big body like the 6D does. But of course on this you have Nikon's F mount, and you do have even more buttons and dials and things like that on the D7100, even versus the Canon 6D. You know, this is a slightly more professional body, I would say, and you're also getting the dual SD card slots and things like that. So you really can't go wrong with either of these two cameras when it comes to strictly photography. And then when it comes to recording video, the Panasonic G7 is definitely the best option out of all of these. This is the only camera that records 4K video, and it's good quality, pretty high bitrate 4K. Without a doubt, the video out of this camera is some of the best you can get at this price point. And at least out of these 5 cameras, it's pretty much the option for video. And then lastly, if you're not specifically doing just photos or videos, you just want a good all-around hybrid camera. Again, you can't go wrong with any of these, but I think the best option is the Canon 6D. You know, you're getting that great full frame sensor, a great feeling body. You know, again, it's a little bit big and bulky, especially versus some of these mirrorless options, but it has good full frame 1080p video. You're getting a mic input as well. You know, it has pretty decent autofocus in photos and videos. And then of course, those 20 megapixel full frame photos just look awesome out of this camera. And so that wraps this video up. If you made it this far, I really appreciate you watching, and maybe consider dropping a like and subscribing to my channel. But that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.